My name is Ben Klosek, and welcome to Tots, Tweens, Teens, and Screens, supporting healthy child development in a screen-wise way.
What are the ways that technology affects our consciousness? And what are the ways that these screen technologies affect our body and the way that we perceive the world? I run a web design agency, as well as I teach technology and woodwork in the middle school for 6th, 7th, and 8th years. They're the ones that are dealing with this the most. And that's an important doorway through which we really need to mentor them. I've looked closely at the developmental picture that Rudolf Steiner gave us that informs Waldorf. Really wanted to see what is the intersection between that and our contemporary values around screen media. And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We'll be looking at the developmental phases. What I'm calling Tots is from birth to 7 years. Tweens is kind of 7 to 14, and then teens is 14 to 21. These 7-year cycles are a core part of the Waldorf curriculum, and the developmental process that each individual is going through in these years is very distinct. This is going to be our roadmap for tonight. You'll be able to follow along if you just watch the slides as well. You don't need the handout, but if you want to take notes or look at it, that's going to be helpful for you. We're going to start in the early years, and we're going to explore each phase, and then we'll talk about some strategies we can use to satisfy the needs of that phase as regards technology. So the early years job was to help cultivate the inner garden for students. And that inner garden is essentially all the experiences that we have through our days. And if it's a good experience, that plants a seed in us. And that can develop into a future perspective on the world. And so when we're working with children in this age, we want to look at what are the things we're planting? How are we tending it? And conscious of maybe there's experiences that they've had that might need some support, might need some help kind of resolving a little bit. That might be like pulling the weeds in our metaphor. These foundational skills are critical for future development. So what do we do about this for the little kids? Well, the foundational piece is as little media as possible. For this 0 to 7 years, it's just not worth it. There's not a lot of value that they can get from it. They don't have enough life experience to understand how to make sense of what's on the screen. So tween years is from 1st and 2nd grade up till 8th grade. And clearly there's a broad stretch of developmental phases in here. In this phase, the guiding principle is beauty. And if we think about feelings as the primary development, we can see why. Beauty is not good or bad. Beauty is subjective. It's nuanced, just like the feelings. We're kind of trying to figure out how do they fit in. So we want to give them opportunities to experience beauty and to create beauty. Every May lesson book page has a drawing. Maybe it's got a border around it. They're singing, they're sculpting, they're playing musical instruments. All of these activities require emotional engagement. So you remember I talked about that part of the brain, the limbic part of the brain that's developing. Part of that is this risk-reward center. And because it's coming online first, every time they scroll to a new image, say on Instagram, or every time they get a new message on Snapchat, or every time they watch a new movie, they have a dopamine dump that they get addicted to very easily because their brain is overproducing those kinds of hormones. They're still trying to figure out the world. As I mentioned before, their feeling life is kind of overwhelming often. Our world today is kind of rushing quickly towards this sense of always new, always informative, but that ends up introducing a lot of mental clutter. Our minds are much more full and busy with, I would argue, largely extraneous information, stuff that's not really critical for our well-being or our livelihood. We want their inner life to be able to expand and for them to be able to have room in there to engage with it in a way that's not confusing. We're trying to create an even baseline that makes them feel safe and secure. Now we're making the transition into middle school here, where there's a lot more pressure to have access. In that context, that's where your family values come into place. Because if your family values say, this is not something that we want to have in our lives, those are real. And you need to honor that for your family's values. When you're ready, because there will come that day, to introduce them to technology or give them their own screen device, you need to be ready to parent that. What is the internet? What is a computer for that matter? Is there somebody on the other end, even though it's just an avatar? How do I know that's my friend on the other side? How do I maintain privacy? Do I just tell people what my address is if they ask? There's a website that's called cyberwise.org. And CyberWise's tagline is "No parent left behind." And it gives you the context to start to mentor them into appropriate use. The last piece that we want to touch in on is the adult. Our real place is we're developing creative capacity. How do we use these different senses to work well with the world? How do we use them to navigate and give information to us, but not be ruled by them? Well, there's 3 core things that I'm going to suggest. The first is have a place where you have tech-free time. The other is make the device work for you. Set your device up in a way that supports the habits you want to have. And last, we got to give our attention where it's most needed, which is to our children. So at the end of the day, this whole question of screens and development comes down to our relationships and our attention. And so we have an opportunity to create an environment in our families, in our communities, where this question is honored, where we are actually paying attention